In any case, Dave Perkal, he's an American Society of Cinematography member, and he's had like a pretty awesome career. He shot Vampire Diaries and like a gazillion shows, Entourage, and he is going to talk about anything you want him to talk about. But I think we're going to start out by, well, let's start out by giving Dave a round of applause so that he can see the show him your hands. Cool.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dave.
Thanks.
Do you want to tell us about what happened? Were you in high school? When did you get into cameras?
Oh, it's an interesting story. Okay, so I got into film from still photography. I grabbed my dad's Nikon when he had it. He wasn't using it. I said, hey, can I just grab this and just go around and start taking some pictures? So I started taking some pictures. And my dad was in the movie business, but on the finance side. So my dad was the head of the studio at Fox and Columbia and was in charge of projects like Star Wars and Planet of the Apes and stuff like that. But he was really the guy that controlled all the money for all of those films. And so after school, my brother and I would go to the studio a lot, and we would run around and we'd see everybody making films and stuff like that. One of my favorite films was Starsky and Hutch. I mean, TV shows was Starsky and Hutch at the time. And I remember seeing that car on the studio a lot and walking up to that car going, oh my God, there's the car. And when I looked inside that car, Starsky and Hutch were inside. And I was just blown away. I was gobsmacked. And I said, hey, how's it going? And then they turned to me and they're like, hey, how are you doing? And then through the other window, I could see a camera move in for an over-the-shoulder shot. And I had actually walked onto the set at the time that they were shooting. But they were so cool about it. And I could see the camera guys lean over and go, what's happening? But anyway, so I got involved in photography at that point. And I kind of feel like, when I was looking at images when I was a teenager, it was really the resonance of those images that kind of drew me in. You know what I mean? It's that point when you start looking at a picture and it starts to speak to you and it starts to evolve and it starts to become something else. And I knew that there was some power in that. And, my dad took me to see Seven Samurai, Akira Kurosawa. And at the time I was just a kid and it was really hard to keep up with the subtitles, but you knew the visual dialectic kind of drew you into the film. And it was actually that which was what the images were telling the story. And I recognized that there was some power in that also. So the next thing I did was I grabbed a Super 8 camera, and I think I was 14 or 15, and I started doing pixelated animations where you've seen these things, and they used to be popular back when I was a kid, where somebody would sit on the ground like they were a car and you could get them to move through space and stuff like that. And what you would do is you would just animate them. You would have them sit there and you'd take a picture and take another picture and they move and move and move and you string that together as an animation. So I started doing that. And then I decided I wanted to go to film school to learn more about it. And when I was 17, I decided to make a short film that I would direct. And there was a short story by Ambrose Bierce that I really liked, which was called An Occurrence on Owl Creek Bridge, which is about a Civil War soldier that is hung off this bridge. And it's really kind of a sort of a Charlie Kaufman back through time thing about the moment before he's hung. And he actually feels like he's escaped at that moment. And I really loved the way that the images can relate to space and time. And so I attempted to make this film and it was a complete disaster. So I think it was more than I could chew. And so then I went off to film school and I did my undergrad at San Diego and I did grad school at AFI with Rob, your instructor, who's a good friend of mine. And then I left film school and I just started at the bottom and went back into crew. And I just crewed my way from being a gaffer to being a loader, to being a second assistant, to being a first assistant, to being an operator, and then finally getting an opportunity to DP. And there's many ways to do it. And a lot of people just go to school and they want to just pop out and be the DP, or they want to pop out and be the director. And I felt like, although my school experience was great and I learned a lot, I felt like there was a lot that I still needed to learn. And every time I was on the set, there was a lot of knowledge that I was just picking up from these great masters. When I operate for a great cameraman, and I would look through the camera at that time, I would see how the lighting would all come together into one image at that point. I would see how the DPs would relate to the director and how they would kind of block and work out the details of a scene. And so it was a great way to learn and get paid at the same time. So that when I had the opportunity to finally move up, and I'd been shooting short films and music videos and all of that stuff, when I had the opportunity to finally move up, I was really ready to do it coming out of the gate. I don't know if that answers your question or if my verbosity exceeds my expertise in that. but
No,
so anyway, so
that was great. I'm sorry. Go.
Yeah. So anyways, but what I want to say, because I speak to a lot of universities, I speak to a lot of students, and what I want to say is that that's my path. That may not be your path. And everybody's kind of worried about what their path is going to be. And there's no right or wrong path, right? So the biggest thing that you need to know is you need to be self-reflexive enough to look inward, to look at the art that you want to create, to look at the images that you want to create, the stories you want to tell, and find out, really be critical of yourself and find out what you're lacking and what you need to work on. When I first went to AFI, I was like, I understand the tenets and the basics of cinematography, but I really need to work on speed and getting things faster and bigger. So I took on some of the bigger, cycle projects that we had in grad school to kind of master that, master the professional equipment, master all of that stuff, and to get faster and to work with directors in kind of a more intense way. And then I knew that I needed to kind of leave there and go learn from the masters, because there's a lot of hypotheticals that you'll learn at film school, and then everything when you're on the set is something new. So I think that that's your best path to success. And I mean, and Rob, I'll defer to you if you have any other questions, but I'm happy to take questions about that path later on.
Yeah, I think that I have plenty of questions for you, but I'm wondering, I think some of the students have questions for you, and it's rare for us to get access to a DP, and I would love if people have specific or non-specific. I'd love for other people to ask some questions, actually. So maybe I'll jump in if we get, I'm going to ask you a question, but I encourage people to put something up in the chat. I was just talking with Alexis about this, and that a lot of us, we play with a camera and we take stills or we shoot video, and we think of that as being a director of photography. And I was telling Alexis that a lot of the older DPs, their focus is light, really, and some of them, often they're not operating. They're looking at the light, and they've hired, excellent operators that are working for them.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So when you're first starting out, you're doing everything. When you get to a level that I'm at, when you're spending, my last project was $15 million an episode, and their Netflix project, and they're spending $1 bazillion on everything. You have a lot of support people. You have a lot of rope to hang yourself, basically. But what cinematography basically is what you're doing is you're taking the concept that the director has about how they're going to treat the material, which is the script. And you're kind of photographing, and I've talked to Rob about this before too, that I kind of have a theory that sure, we photograph the script and we're all doing what's appropriate for the script, but we're also trying to get those emotional beats in there and kind of really hang on to those things. And cinematography is really the telling of that story through images. So a lot of that has to do with lighting. So like when you're at a level where I'm at, you'll have a camera operator or several camera operators that work for you. You have several camera assistants. You have a gaffer that helps you with your lighting. You have a grip that helps you with your lighting and your rigging and stuff like that, and camera movement. So you have a lot of people that are on your team that you kind of collaborate with in order to get this vision told. But at the very beginning of all of that, what you do is you sit down with the director and you kind of find out the tone of the project and where you see things going. And so what I'll do in prep is I'll watch films with that director. We'll look at artwork. I'll pull still frames. I'll make a lookbook. We'll look at palettes, and we'll kind of use that as a springboard into that. And then what we'll do is we'll break down each scene, and we'll say, okay, these are the beats in the scene. This is what's important. This is where the characters came from. This is where they're going. And then I'll use photography to elevate all of that. So it's really about using the art of cinematography is like using all the stylistic elements, and you'll work with a production designer, you'll work with makeup, you'll work with wardrobe, you'll work with all the other creative teams in order to bring it all together, because it all comes together at a fulcrum as it comes through that lens, in order to kind of elevate what the director has as a vision. And you get to have your own little artistic expression also. I'm not saying you don't, but did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I think Alexis has some questions for you, but I wanted to ask you first, what can a director do to help you? What makes you have the best work experience from your interaction with the director?
Well, there's yeah. So there's all sorts of directors. There's directors that are really good and really visual, and they know the lenses and they know all that stuff. And that's probably what you see as the trope of the director when they say, let's shoot this on a 27 millimeter from here, and we'll do that. And there's some directors that are very good at calling that. And there are other directors who I've worked with, like William Friedkin, for example, who shot The French Connection, who is just about the actors, and he lets the cinematographer kind of build everything around that. We'll watch a rehearsal and he'll say, well, it looks pretty obvious to me, and we're like, yes, it does. What are we doing now? So there's a whole range that you can do, but I think the most important thing is to get on the same level as far as what the tone is of the film. You could take any film, and you can look at the tone in that film, and each one is different. Like if you took Shawshank Redemption and you compared it with a film that was the same year, Legends of the Fall, two completely different tones, because the scripts are different, right? You have, and if you looked at the palette of those films, it's completely different, because it's pushing the narrative and supporting characters in a different way. And so that's all decided between the director and the DP and the production designer and everybody else. But photographically, what we're doing is we're kind of staying consistent with that tone. And so as long as I know what's in the director's head as far as what the tone is in the scene and what the tone is overall, then I have a place to work from. And when I say tone, you also want to remember that you're going to, just as a character and dramatic structure arcs through a film, so does the visual approach arches. So you may start as a highly objective viewpoint and then move into a subjective characterization of somebody. Or you may start, with wider lenses and then kind of constrict everything into a claustrophobic frame. You may be using off frames or short frames to kind of have a sense of unease at a certain point. And that may all be coming in very subtly and kind of evoke an experience as you start to move through those different acts and arcs within the character.
Fantastic. Wow. Matt, I'm going to have you ask a question in a second, but I wanted to hear a little bit more about that, Dave. And the thing I'm hoping you might not even recall this, but a while back you talked to me. It was related to, I'm hoping you can help the audience understand what you mean when you say your job is to find and record the emotional beats. And you had told a story about a troubled meeting with a director. I don't know how else to say it.
Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Okay, so I was doing a project for Marvel, and I had a very new director, first-time director, and it was a great opportunity. And I've worked with a lot of first-time directors, and a lot of times I'm chosen to work with first-time directors because I can help them get through this and kind of lead them if they get into trouble. And I've done this with several directors. It seems like, and I could be wrong, that first-time directors struggle with the beat of the scene. Now, when you're writing a script, you write a log line for that script, right? In 2 sentences, what is the script about? Each scene has its own log line, right? And each scene if you think about dramatic conflict, it's about two people meeting in the middle of the room and one person trying to get to that side, one person trying to get to that side. And there's their dramatic struggle, right? And in that, they both have contentions that they're trying to work out, right? So a beat can be something that relates to their own subjective interpretation of what that struggle may be. Like, I need to, like, this character clocks the watch because he's late for the time, or he clocks a person's hand that has a knife in it, and then you Eisensteinally you go up to his face, and you could kind of equate some emotion in that. But in this scene in particular, we were doing a big fight scene between our hero, who we've been following all season, and the nemesis of the show, and our hero kills the nemesis. And this is one scene that we did over 5 days. So there's a lot of elements within that scene. And when they give you 5 days, it really should take 7, but they give you 5 days. That's how they do everything, right? They don't ever give you enough time to do anything. There's never a cinematographer or director that I've ever talked to that said, wow, we had more time than we needed. We had more equipment than we needed. They always give you less. So it's always a struggle to get things done. But what you have to do is you have to come away with the actual beats of it. So in this scene, this character kills the nemesis, right? So we shot the killing scene, and then it's witnessed by our lead actor's parents, right? So I said, now let's go get the reaction from the parents, right? Which is an important story beat in this. And he said, well, it's not in the script. And I said, well, if it was in the script, it would be 1,200 pages long. So you need to interpret what those beats are, read between the lines and interpret what those things are, and find out how this relates to everybody. The important part about what I'm trying to say is like, this scene had probably 22 characters in it, right? So as a director, or as a cinematographer, and a lot of film students ask the same question, is where should I put the camera? Who should I cover? How much coverage do I need? You don't have time to get 22 singles, 22 overs, 22 medium shots, you're shooting a documentary at that time. You have to come out with some sort of idea about what your take is on that scene. And if you understand what the beats of that scene are, then the camera placement becomes evident. And it becomes evident in who you need to cover and who you don't need to cover, who's superfluous in that scene and who is vitally important in that scene. And you can get away with doing 2 or 3 shots in that scene of 22 people and make it more powerful. I don't know if that makes any sense. And if anybody has any questions about that, I can explain that a little further.
No, that was fantastic. But if anyone has questions, please just post on the chat that you'd like to ask something. And Matt, you can you open up your microphone and ask yourself?
Yeah. Hi, Dave. I was just wondering what your role is exactly on the day of filming. Like, are you behind the camera ensuring like the shots, or are you more advising everything? And I was wondering what a day at like HBO is like compared to like the CW, or does it more depend on the director?
I'll answer your second one first. The studio doesn't really matter. There's no like special thing that I have to adjust because the studio is different. The budgets are different. But like I said, you never have enough time to actually get everything in, and you don't have enough equipment, and you don't have enough crew. So I don't really notice a difference between what that is. I mean, the politics, of course, are very different in those regards. I mean, HBO has always been kind of, we're hiring the right people, so let's not bother them. Where the CW might be like, I'm going to micromanage every single element of what's happening. And that's just a political thing, right? So what my role is I am, well, let me just take you through a typical scene, and I'll tell you how it works. So after we've prepped with the director, after we've prepped with everybody, we've scouted, we've picked the locations, we've painted the locations, we've figured out the tone, we've done all of that stuff. And now we're on the day on the set, and we're actually shooting the scene. So what we will do is the director and I will usually come in with the actors, and we'll do a reading. And this depends on the director. Some directors want to do the reading, some don't want to do the reading, some want to rehearse a little bit, and some don't want to rehearse at all. But what we do is we do what's called a blocking. And that's where we find out where the actors are going to be in the scene, and they work out the issues that they may have in the scene, and they show what they've rehearsed, and they've done all of these things. At the time that they're doing the blocking, I may be walking around kind of thinking about which lenses, what position, where the camera's going to be, how this is going to fold in, how many pieces of coverage I think I might need, right? And then I'm also, and I do this quietly, is I'm also supporting the director, because I also have to be very aware of the time, because what I have to do is make the day. So I have to make sure that whatever the director is planning, that we can fit that in and we can finish our day, so that he doesn't do 26 shots of characters that might be superfluous or focus on these things, and kind of find a way that if there's an economy of these shots. But overriding all of that is finding out what's important and what's going to have the most visual resonance and impact. And so I may signal to my assistant, and we have these hand signals, right? So if I go like that, that's a 27, right? That's a 29. So I'll say this to him, and then he'll bring me a lens on a stick, and then I'll start walking around, if the actors are cool with that, and kind of framing things up.
Dave, you're muted. Sorry, Dave.
Oh my God, when did I get muted?
Just after you said 24 on a stick.
27.
27 on a stick.
Okay.
But will you tell them what that means? Because I don't think they know what that means.
Oh, it's a 27 millimeter on a director's viewfinder. You've seen these things that we all walk around with. All that is a ground glass that exactly approximates the camera. So we don't have to pick up the whole camera and walk around with it. So what I'll do is I'll look for shots, and then I'll kind of subtly advise the director, like, hey, just a thought, like a suggestion, like, here's a pitch. If they go to the kitchen counter instead of staying in the doorway, we save a setup. You know what I mean? And knowing that whatever I'm pitching is not, the schedule does not drive my suggestions. My suggestions are driven by the narrative and what has the most impact. You know what I'm saying? So if I feel like the two of those meet, and there's an economy of shots, but it still serves the story, then I can suggest those things. And then what the director can do, he can either take this advice or not take this advice, and then work out another blocking. And he may say subtly, like, hey, what happens if you go to the kitchen counter instead of staying in there? Let's see if it works. And then we'll see if it works. And the best rehearsals to me are the ones where we keep working it out. We keep working it out until we're good with it. Because what happens is, as soon as you think you're good with your blocking, then you invite the whole crew in. And then the crew marks the actors. They put tape down where the actors stopped and what they said. And the stand-ins, the people that we use to help light when the actors are getting last looks, are approximating where they were at the time they said this dialogue exactly. So everybody's focused on this thing as if it's cemented in stone, and then you shoot your master. And if your master is not good, what happens is that you're ducking coverage that becomes problematic. You've painted yourself in a corner. So that's why I prefer to get all those issues up before we invite the crew in. But anyways, so then what I do is the actors leave, the director leaves, and I come in with my, I'll probably confer with the director about, like, look, I think, he'll say, look, I want to have a moving master. I want to do this. And I said, okay, so how about if we just do a moving master from here, and it goes like this, and he and I will look, or he or she and I will look through the viewfinder and kind of approximate what those shots are. And then we'll say, okay, good, go, you got it. And then the crew has a shot, the set. Then I work with my camera operator. What I do is I work with my camera operator first, and I say, okay, this is 1, and the dolly grip follows us 2. And he puts on a mark, and I go, and this is 2. And then I go, can B cameras over here on this lens. And then those guys start setting up the camera. Then my gaffer and my key grip come up. And then I start talking about the lighting and the tone I want to have for this. I say, okay, I want this brought in from the windows. And I get very involved in my own lighting. Some directors of photography will say, like, I want a warm light coming from the window and it should be bright. But I say, like, look, I want a row 18s on there, and I want you to put quarter row on them, and I want them to be tilted down with this. And I want, I get pretty exact with it. But anyways, what we'll do is we'll do all the lighting. Then the stand-ins or work with the camera operator at that time, like, go over here, let's see if we can make this move and make it smooth. Everybody's rehearsing, everybody's working during that time. And then at some point, the AD, I'll tell the AD that we're ready. or we have a 5-minute warning, but I'll be ready in 5 minutes so that he can bring people in when we're ready. We'll work out all our kinks. We'll bring in the first team, and then we'll start shooting. And that's for each take all day long, all the way across the board. So I guess to answer your question in a long way is I'm in a supervisory role, armed with the knowledge of what the director and I have talked about, using my experience as a cinematographer to kind of achieve those goals. I'm not operating the camera, but I'm supervising the operating of the camera. Like I'll tell the camera operator, I want you to pan left at this point. I want you to let him out at this point. I want to have an empty frame here. You know what I mean? Because this is what it means in the scene. And I require my camera operators to be familiar with the script and to know what's going on. The assistants, the guys and girls that are focusing the camera, they have the dialogue memorized, as does the boom people and stuff like that, because what they're doing is they're racking off a dialogue. They're racking focus off a dialogue. So they have to know all of that stuff. So everybody knows every word, every position that actor was during the blocking and everything like that. So we're all working together to kind of bring that together. And the director and I may look at the take, and the director may say, you know what, rack to this person at that time, and then I'll tell the assistant to do that. And then we'll have a take, right? So rarely is the first take like print it and go on. So after the first take, we'll make adjustments. The director will have notes for the actor, and then I will have notes based on what the director and I have talked about for the crew. I will say, like, you know what, that was great, but what I want you to do, because we're widescreen, what I want you to do is I want you to play that frame. Let him get to the short side of that frame before you start to wrap around him, and then reveal that person on that wraparound. You see what I'm saying? Because there's a beat in there, right? So that if two characters are splitting and he's looking that way, right, and he's musing about something, but there's something that he has to referentially think about this character, I can pull him to this side, leave this character out of the frame, wrap around him, and at that moment when he starts to think about it, that person's in the back of the frame and we rack to that person. And that's a one-shot deal that becomes very powerful, because what we're doing, and this is the point, and I didn't say it before, but director of photography directs your attention within the frame with the use of photography. The director directs your attention in the frame with the use of acting and shot selection and everything else. So what we're doing is you have this box and we're saying, this is important here right now. And this is important here right now. And we're forcing your eye to go to certain places. And editing does this also, right? I can edit this point to that point, but it forces your eye to go all the way across the frame. But if I want to keep your eye in this certain point, I'll edit a shot that's the important parts here to the important parts here. See what I'm saying? So all of those things are very planned out before we go in. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool.
We have a question from, I'm not sure if it's Trevor or Carlson, but will you on mic so that you can ask Dave?
Hi, I'm Carlson. I'm on my dad's computer, so that's why it says Trevor. I was just wondering, what are in your opinion, what are the most masterfully shot films you've seen?
That's such a broad question, and I wish I could just come up with like 3 or 4 that I go, okay, this is the answer for each of them. It really depends, and I'll just go back really quick to Shawshank versus Legends of the Fall, because they were both up for the Oscar the same year, and I know Roger Deakins, who shot Shawshank, and I know John Toll, who shot Legends of the Fall. Legends of the Fall won. Although I feel like Shawshank should have won, because I feel like the cinematography in that was more in tune with the intent of that story. And I feel that sometimes the Academy and viewers kind of go with the pretty picture instead of going with what's appropriate for the film. There's just so many references that we have, in building a lookbook too. I find myself grabbing thousands of images that other people shot in their films that I'm kind of using as a reference for what I want to do in this film. And it surprises me every time how well things are shot, I can't give you an exact answer because that would pigeonhole me into one thing, and the list would be thousands of films long.
Dave, will you tell them about lookbooks, because that's something that they could do this evening if they wanted, and it's a really powerful tool, I think. I'm not sure that everyone here knows what a lookbook is.
Okay, so lookbook, back in the day, we would just go, hey, have you seen that film? Let's sit on the couch and watch this movie. That was really cool. Okay, just remember how that was done. But now lookbooks are everything, especially for directors. If you're pitching your script, you want to have a pitch deck. And in that deck, there should be a lookbook. And a lookbook is a series of images that relate to the tone of the story that you want to tell. And it relates to your interpretation of that script, right? You can give the same script. If I gave the same script to all of you and I said, do a lookbook on it, you guys would all have a different lookbook, right? And that's what's interesting about it too, because I can get your interpretation about how you see the film coming out by this lookbook. And a lot of it is experienced with the frame, the use of the frame, how the compositions are, with the use of lighting. A lot of lookbooks will, you may have a lookbook that has sections that say, here's the theme, here's the tone, here's the locations that I see here, and this is important, here's how I see the characters. Here's how I see the characters relating to each other. You have a page about character 1 and character 2 and how they relate to each other, but you'll have a different page for character 1 and a different page for character 2. And they'll show where they've been and what their experiences and their backstory is. And then you'll show the environment, because the environment plays everything in there. You know what I mean? So you have a great film like HUD, Jimmy Wong Howe uses these wide lenses, and you're looking at the vast expanse of wasteland, right? And you think about like the Last Picture Show in Texas by God, and you think about the empty space that was in there, right? Antonio's Lenote, which is about the negative space in there, right? Those are all designed in that way, and it's no accident they're designed in that way. So those lookbooks would relate to that. So what we're looking for in the lookbook, or what people look for, is a consistency of theme, character, tone. And then also, when you start to get good at it, you'll start to put in the arc of that tone, where the character started and where the character ends. I think they're great to practice with. And I think the better you get at lookbooks, the better you're going to get at, especially if there's screenwriters in here or directors, at landing a gig and getting people to look at your script. Because a lot of times, unless you know the person, I'll get a script and a lookbook together, and I'll look at the lookbook first. I just want to see if where the director's coming from, what's happening at that point. And all of my interviews, I create a lookbook for. I just want to know that I'm on the same page with that person. Like if I'm totally off and I see it totally different, good luck to you. No hard feelings. Obviously, we see the project in a different way. Not to say that I'm not open to changing that, but that could be a difference where you might be better served by getting somebody that is more aligned with your vision. There's a great service that my buddy Larry Scher, who's a DP who shot The Joker and the Hangover movies, and he created a website called Shot Deck. And Shot Deck is great for lookbooks, because what you can do is you could type in negative space, orange, light, rain, and it'll come up with every movie that has negative space, orange, light, and rain in it, right? It has a great meta search abilities, and it has really high resolution images. You could use Google, you can use, what another one is this is a great one too. It's called Movie Barcode. And what Movie Barcode does, the barcode that's on your products that you buy? So what Movie Barcode does is they take a movie and they make a barcode out of it. They take each frame in that film, each actual shot, they take a photograph of it and they make it a strip long like this, and they keep all the color in there. And you can see how the color of that film changes as the movie arcs. You could see the palette is all designed in one swatch, right? So a lot of lookbooks that I do, I will always insert a movie barcode swatch in some shape or form within my lookbooks to kind of say, this is where I kind of see palettes going. And when I start to talk to the production designers, the palette's very important, because we have to be on the same page with that, because I have to know what color he's thinking, because the wardrobe is also starting to build wardrobe based on what color the sets and what tone he thinks this is going to be in. So that's how we come up with the palette.
Okay, that was amazing. You just taught me some stuff that I'm excited about for after this, after I fix my daughter's
Okay,
cell phone, and then after this. Alexis has some questions for you, and I know once Alexis goes through those, that Matt has another question for you as well. But let's give some time to Alexis.
Okay, sounds good. I actually started using Shot Deck over the summer, and it's super helpful. I think they update it regularly with like newer films, so that's also just very helpful, just stylistically. But I wanted to kind of revert back to what you were saying earlier about the relationship between a director and a DP. So during that developmental process, you watch films or you'll discuss greatly about like the look and the tone of the film. Do you guys develop that lookbook together, or do you guys do it separately and then bring it together and present it to each other? Or what's your process usually like in terms of your own visual just lookbook board?
Okay, so it becomes it depends on what you're doing. So I did this TV series for Netflix called Cowboy Bebop, and so we're creating. What we have to do is we have to create basically a Bible, right? Because it's science fiction, so it takes place on another planet, and it's based on an anime, and it's moving into other worlds. And so what we do is, like, the director may create a lookbook, I'll create a lookbook, the production designer will create a lookbook, we'll all get together and we'll say yes, yes, no, no, no. Then what I'll do is I'll start immersing myself in all of those images. It's not a book that sits on my table. I rip those pages out and I wallpaper my office in it, right? So there's no space on the walls. It looks like you know, just wallpaper of the images. And then I'll start moving those images around to be like first act, second act, third act, this character, that's happening over there, that's a location, so that I'm always immersed in it. And what we did on this show is we started doing it to the entire office, so that everybody was involved in the process, so that when you walked in, if you were a production secretary, you knew what it was going to look like. Everybody knew what it was look like. We were all surrounded by it. And I thought that was a great process in that. So, I mean, the answer is yes, we develop it together because we all want to be on the same page, because the cheapest time, the best time to kind of work all that stuff out is in pre-production. Because as soon as you get into production, like I said, you will not have enough time to kind of shoot jump balls.
Dave, there was a great thing. We had Monique Ganderton, the stunt coordinator, in the other week, and she has this mantra, this new mantra, fix it in prep. That she
Right. Well, that's another good thing too. So like this thing was heavy intensive stunts also, and the stunts were, you know, lots of green screen and visual effects and motion control and stuff like that. And we would do what's called a previs. And so the previs is when there's a fight scene or something like that, we would do a pre-visualization, right? So the stunt team would put together a video of the fight. So what we had was we had another warehouse, and it would approximate locations, and they would build the locations out of cardboard, and they would do the stunts in there. And we would come by, the director and I would come by, and we would look at the stunts, and I would say, well, that's good, but that's a miss. Can you do something like this where you swing over the guy's foot? Because I'm at this point, there's a hole in the fight, you know what I mean? All those things. So we start working all that stuff out. And then what we have is what's called a tech viz, right? So we had a fight scene where these two characters are fighting on the rooftop, and one of them goes over the ledge, right? And then another character, as he's shooting at somebody else, reaches out with his arm and grabs them right before they fall, right? So you think, oh, okay, well, how do I do that? How do I send a character off a ledge in one shot, pulling, and bring them down like that? Well, it's many shots, right? And so what you have to do is you have to start breaking apart those shots. And so what we do is we do a tech viz. And the tech viz involves the visual effects team doing an animated version of what you're doing character-wise. And then they put in, using the fulcrum. Fulcrum is basically the field, the cone field as it projects out from the camera, and then saying, oh, you're going to need a green screen here, you're going to need one here, and all that, right? So when you see these rigs where you have all these green screens that are laid out like that, we don't just guess and go, no, put one over there and put one over there. This is all computer generated, and it tells us where to put it at that time. And so what we do is then we start playing it, right? So we'll play the fight scene, and then we can flip layers, and then it would flip to the anime, the previs on that, and then it'll flip to the tech viz, and I could see where the green screens are coming in and how the motion control needs to work at that point, and how the layers, and I could pull those things apart. So that's all happening in prep, so that it can be worked out. Because a lot of times too, the production designer is waiting. He's like, how big does this need to be? How are we doing this rooftop? Well, you don't send a character over the edge. You lay the building on its side at some point and shoot that way, right? And then you have one like this, but you can't hang the person. So you're basically hanging them off 6 feet, right? Not 30 feet. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And then just in terms of like the technicality of what happens on set. So I know you mentioned how everybody or most people in the camera department, or at least those who are assisting you, are very familiar with the script. How does the camera department adjust when the actor or actors go off script, specifically with the technical cues such as racking focus or kind of being aware of those beats? What happens when those aren't exact and the actors kind of start ad-libbing a little bit?
Well, I mean, I don't think you should be dogmatic about anything. Like anything the director and I have planned, and anything that happens like with this tech viz and previs and all of that other stuff, if we find some better thing that happens on the set, if there's sort of some serendipity that happens, we're going to use that and just pitch the other idea, right? So everybody needs to be able to move and kind of adjust to those things. And we'll know what's happening before we do the take. There's no take that we're going to do and the actor's just going to go, well, I decided to walk over here instead of walk over there. You know what I mean? That's going to cause issues, of course. And of course, the actor's going to have to clear that with the director, because ultimately it's the director's vision, right? So if that happens, we'll huddle back up like it's a football play, and we'll go, okay, you know what? It's a play option this time. We're gonna run this play instead of that play, right? And then everybody knows, and we'll tell everybody and let everybody know. And then if the assistant needs to get marks, or he needs to talk to the actor, like, where are you going to say it now? You're changing it to here. Where is this going to be? Everybody jumps in at that point, and that's a break in the take, and we make an adjustment for that.
Thank you. And then if it's all right, I just want to squeeze in one last question.
Sure.
So I was curious in terms, so you talked about your relationship with directors and just the visual crew and the team to kind of execute those visual resonances. How do you balance your own relationship if you take up the roles of both DP and director simultaneously?
Well, I do some commercials where I'm the director and the DP. But commercials are very, the scale is a lot smaller, right? So rather than doing massive setups with construction cranes and doing all this other stuff, you're only really shooting 30 seconds, right? So in those instances, I get hired to do commercials that have a little bit more VFX, right? So what I do is I sit on the camera, and I'm the director, the DP, and the operator, and my producer will run notes back and forth between the agency to me. So the advertising agency will be huddled up in a monitor video village area, and they'll say, well, hey, can they do this instead of that? And then my producer will come up and say, hey, the agency wants to know if they could do this and that. And then I give the note to the actor, and then I tell the dolly grip and the people where to move the lights and to make that adjustment, and then we just go ahead and go. It's not faster. And it's not always better. You know, the best thing about this industry is it's a collaborative process. And so ideas that you didn't think about will be offered up by everybody else. And the more you let people participate in the process and make them, allow them to have some ownership in it, the better off your project's going to be. Because there is no megalomaniac that's going to make the best film ever, and I've done it only my way, and I didn't listen to anybody else. I don't know anybody that has succeeded in that way. What we do when we get up to the position of DP and director and production designer and all these other, is we're taking advice from everybody else. We're getting it all day long. And I always say, look, if craft service gives me some great idea, I'm going to use it and I will give them credit for it, because it's going to end up in the final film and it's done at that point. And so I try to make anybody can come up and talk to me about any idea they have. And it's up to me to be the gatekeeper to say, does that fit tonally in what we're doing? Is that what we need to do? And for me not to have an ego and to be able to say, your idea is way better than my idea and we're going to use it. And when you go home, you're going to see your idea on there and we're using it. And I will stand up in front of the whole crew and say, this is so-and-so's idea and it's awesome. And this is what we're going to do at this point. And it really kind of allows people to participate in that process. And at the same time, with my camera operator and my gaffer and my key grip, I say, look, I don't hire people to be yes people, to be sycophants to me. You know, I hire them to have their own opinion and their own idea, right? We're all on the same path to get in the same direction, but I want to make sure that you're double checking my work and you're keeping me straight about what needs to happen. And if there's a better idea, I want you to tell me about the better idea. A lot of times I'll even joke about it too. Like I'll tell my camera operator, I'll go, that's your one and that's your two. And I go make it better, you know? And then I'll check on them through that. And then they're always, the best camera operators, the ones that I see that aren't just sitting on the dolly, you know, chatting it up with the extras. They're actually working on the shot over and over. Like, what if we're just down a little inch here? What if we moved over here a little inch? What if you speed up? And they're always working on it, always working on it. And the same thing happens with my gaffer and my key grip. You know, like I say that I like to be very involved in lighting and I'll call the actual units of the lamps and stuff like that, but don't hold me to that. Like if I call for a blonde, and blonde is a 2K open face, and you have a 2K Fresnel, I can make that work. You see what I'm saying? But don't run to the truck and have Transpo take you halfway down through the village, through the circus to go get this light if you have something close that's faster and could do the same job. You see what I'm saying? Or if you have a better idea about how to approach this scene, because you understand what the end result is and what I'm going for.
Thank you.
Yep.
Alexis, do you have any more questions or are you good right now?
I have a few more, but I think I'll let other students chime in.
Okay, let's Elle or Nikki or Edith, do you have anything you want to ask Dave? No. Oh, Matt has a question. Matt, why don't you ask?
Yeah, I had a question about Cowboy Bebop. How much did the cinematography of the animated show affect your decisions on the live action, and how did you work through that?
That is, well, it's influenced by the animation, right? And I think the difference between, and what I learned was there's a different kinetic energy in cinematography and live action than there is in animation. So in animation, you can hold a frame for 12 seconds without cutting, because what you have is you have a different kinetic energy within the layers of that image, right? So animation is really good at this, where they have the one character like holding a thing and then everything's moving at a different time, a spatial relation that's different to that character. And animation is very good at that, and that becomes very hypnotic and that draws you in. Cinematography doesn't do that. There isn't a way to do that. So what we were doing is trying to find frames that were, you know, that were evocative of those images. You know what I mean? So almost the whole show is shot slightly Dutched, wider lenses up close, using kind of that graphic quality of that to make that work. And whether it works or not, it remains to be seen. I don't know. It might be rejected by you know, the anime fan base, or it may be accepted, or I don't know if it's going to work at all, but it was fun to go try.
I have a question for you, Dave. When you were talking about coming up with ideas that serve the story, and I'm wondering when it's hour 12 or 13 or 17, and things are very tense, and a scene needs to be delivered. How do you manage that? How do you make peace with that and get that to happen?
Well, I mean, you're constantly managing every minute of the day, and your AD is on you the whole time trying to keep that flow go. But there are certain times when certain things happen that are out of the control, out of your control. You might have a child actor, right? Difficult to work with. It eats up a lot of time. You might have animals that don't work and that eat up a lot of time. It may have started to rain and lightning hit, and all of a sudden the generators have to stop for a half hour. All of these things will come into play. There are plenty of assassins out to ruin your schedule. And so at the end, you have to just focus and don't let any of that get to you, and just kind of focus on, if I had to rip everything away and there's one important thing in this scene, what is it, right? And so I had a director that was struggling on another project I was doing in Canada, and he was kind of all over the place. And I said, look, I want you to go home tonight, and I want you to just write one sentence for each scene of what it is, what it's about, and it'll inform you about what you need to get there. Like, what do you actually need to get out, and what's perfume, and there is an economy. Film is great because there's a way to tell things in one shot. There's a way to tell it in 4 shots. You know what I mean? There's a way to get it done. And that's when you really have to be creative and think on your feet. And you just have to know that if you prepped correctly and you've prepped enough, and you're intimately involved with the story, and you know exactly where it needs to go and what needs to happen, you'll know emotionally what has to be delivered in order to make that happen. And you'll be able to kill your babies at that point. Like, I've had thousands of times, I've had the 75-foot techno crane ready to do a mag release, to do all these really cool things, and we're like, it's the end of the day, wrap the techno crane. It's not going to save our life, and it's not about that. It's about something else. And that was a cool way to go when we were there. But what we really need right now, this is what we really need right now. And you just have to persevere and focus on that. And hopefully, they say it when you race sailboats too. Like, if you think about, if you say to yourself, wow, I should reef, it's already too late, right? So you should be kind of keeping an eye out for those things and anticipating issues that may come. And the other thing is that when things don't work, don't be dogmatic and stick to it. If it's not working, it's not working. Get off of it and move on to something else. Because I've seen this happen a lot of times where people are just dogmatically stuck to it. Well, it's what I planned, and this is the way I want it to be, and it has to be this way. And you put it on its feet, and for whatever reason, maybe it's the way the script is written, the way the actors are reading it, the way the blocking is, the way the camera's moving, whatever it is, it's just not working. And you just have to sit there and just be totally objective and look at it and go, it's not working. We're moving on to something else. And the sooner that you're able to do that, to kill your baby in that moment, the better off you're going to be.
Okay. I want to ask you about the strike, but I'm actually really curious if Alexis or anybody else has a question. That would sort of be, it's not gossip, but it would be close to gossip. And Alexis, do you have something? Does anyone have a question?
One of my questions actually did touch on the strike. So if you want
Perfect. Do you
Go ahead and ask. I'm on the board at 600, so go ahead and ask.
So I was just gonna ask that, considering like the stories and the testimonies are kind of growing and increasing in numbers, and people are being a bit more open about sharing their experiences from sets. What are some ways that you, at the top of, or the head of the department, the camera department, can integrate into film sets or film productions that can help support those within the departments, and can kind of make the process go a bit smoother across departments?
Right. Well, that's a good question. The strike, what we did is, just so that everybody's clear about it, is we just authorized a strike to happen if our leader in the IA decides that he's not getting anywhere in the negotiations, then they could call a strike. So it's just an authorization vote. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a strike. It just means that 99% of us have said, you know, enough is enough with this, and we want to have a better contract. And what we're really striking for is turnaround time, the time you get when you're home and you come back, because some of the crafts have 8 hours. So they can go 14 and you're only off for 8, and 14 you're off for 8, and 15 and you're off for 8, and 16 and you're off for 8. And if you know how that works, is you'll start Monday at 7 o'clock in the morning, then Tuesday will be a 10 o'clock call, then Wednesday will be a 1 o'clock call, and then kids are racing outside, and you know, so on until Friday. It becomes 5 o'clock, and you get off Saturday at 6 in the morning, and you have to be back Monday at 7. So that's not sustainable. So what we do every show is the director, the AD, and I will sit down and break down the script, and we'll break it down into what's called a one-liner. The one-liner is the schedule of what's going to be shot that day and how we've broken up all the scenes, and we tried to make a schedule of it, right? And we'll take each one of those days, and they're in strips. I don't know if you guys are looking at those things, but they're in strips. It'll say like scene 24, Bob meets Sue at the airport, right? Scene 56, parking lot at night, right? We'll shoot those in the same day, right? And what we'll do is we'll time those out, and we'll say, okay, well, this is 3 hours and that's 2 hours, and then we'll add it up. And then we'll look at it and we'll go, oh my God, it's 15 hours. So then, you know, the issue that's happening now is that sometimes, and I'm not going to say any names about it, sometimes you will take that 15-hour day and you'll go to the producer and go, hey, we have a 15-hour day here. And he'll go, well, you just figure it out. I don't care, just do something. And which is not really the way you want to hear it. Or sometimes we'll hear a producer go, okay, let's get in there and let's see if we could change something with the writer. Let's see if we could change this. Let's see if I can add a day, because that's not sustainable for us to go that long, right? So we'll give that advance warning. As far as that, you know, they're kind of in control of the schedules. You know, the cinematographer is basically, it's an unknown entity, right? So they don't know exactly how long I'm going to take. Every cinematographer has a different speed that they go at. They don't know how much money we're going to spend. They don't know how we're going to, you know, because there's nothing that we can show, because a lot of it's hypothetical and happens on the day. The one thing that I do, and I'm on the safety committee at the ASC, I mean, at Local 600, is just make sure that everybody works safe. You know what I mean? So while people are putting in rigs and stuff like that, I will walk around and make sure people have their harnesses on, make sure that things are happening correctly. I've lost some friends, you know, that were killed on jobs that you guys have probably heard about. And so I just will not let that happen. So it doesn't matter to me if we make it or not, if we're doing something that's unsafe. So that's what we can do to kind of protect people. I really don't have control over when people come back in, you know, what the turnaround is. That's controlled by the studios and the producers. And I think that's what we're striking for, to give people a better contract in that. And everybody has a different turnaround, and I have one of the longer turnarounds. But the people lower on the rung have the shorter turnarounds, which is really unfair. So they're making the least amount of money and they're getting the least amount of sleep. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to raise the turnaround for those people and to raise the wages for those people, because if those people get longer turnarounds, then everybody else gets a longer turnaround. It becomes safer, because when after 12 hours, it's really not very productive, you know, and I've, you know, like I've worked in other countries, and like I said, I was in New Zealand doing Cowboy Bebop. Before that, I did another pilot there for the guys that did The Americans, and that country doesn't work over 10 hours. So 10 hours, they go home, you know, and it works. You know why? Because when we don't finish what we did that day, we just come back the next day and start that with that same scene, and they just budget that in. So there is a way to do it in that way, and it's a way better lifestyle. Hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Yep. Anyone else?
Sorry, my mouse was trapped from my condensation from my drink. It is 7:32. Will everyone show Dave their hands? I'm so grateful that we got him to come and talk to us. So thank you for that.